it's Leila, the proud poly kinky queer slut. Today I want to tell you about one of my favorite relationship tools, and it's the relationship smorgasbord. Smorgasbord. Buffet. It's the relationship buffet, but the Swedish word for it, smorgasbord. What this is it's a particular tool that kind of started from relationship anarchy, and really the relationship anarchy is really relationships that put autonomy at the center of what you want in the relationship. So value autonomy above other things. And what this smorgasbord is it's a tool you can use to sit down with your partners, and go through different elements of your relationship and different things that you want, things that you don't want. And this is particularly helpful when you're talking about advancing or escalating your relationship, or in a non-traditional way. So, we've got this idea that a relationship starts with like casual dating, and then progresses to being boyfriend girlfriend, and then you get engaged and you get married and you have kids, and that's the relationship escalator. Well, this is if you want to do relationships without the escalator, if you want to have non-traditional relationships, or relationships that might weave in and out, or you just find yourself in a relationship that doesn't fit in the boxes, or for me also, if your marriage isn't quite fitting the way that you want it to, if the traditional marriage concept isn't working for you the way you want, the smorgasbord is a way to have those discussions. And the idea is this could be expanded to other parts of life too, like thinking about these things in the context of any connection you have, like work, family, any of those things. Take the ones about sex off the table, and a lot of this is just how we interrelate with each other. And having conscious conversations about this with your partners can really, really help. Where with anyone you have a relationship with can really help, have communication and intention around what you're doing. I will say I've used this really successfully in some cases. I definitely also have had relationships fail where I used this and tried to make it work and to figure out de-escalation, and it just ended up being just incompatibility. So I will link to this, but just so that I'm just going to read you off some of the key things they talk about. So and it's like a chart with imagine it like a tray with a whole bunch of dishes on it, and then things that you can talk about and put in the circles. So, for example, there's everything from like legal, who has power of attorney, adoptions, marriages, what's our legal relationship, what's our financial relationship, are we sharing money, who's picking up more money here and there, how are we communicating, what's the frequency of our communication, are we communicating too much, too little, emotional support, who's doing the emotional labor of the emotional support, and how much, and how is that working, public displays of affection, how much of that do you want, how much do we collaborate? Do we have a professional relationship, work relationship, or not work relationship? Some of my relationships, I don't want my wife anywhere near my work. I love her, and running a life with her is great, but I've got pretty strict boundaries around people who are my work colleagues and who aren't. Domestic chores. What are we doing with our, how are we managing our life in terms of who takes care of what? Power exchange. What kind of and I love that in the power exchange there are specific, this is the multi-amory version. There are specific like age play and pet play DS relationship ideas here. But then one way that I've extrapolated that is traditional marriage roles. And to what degree are we adhering to traditional marriage roles of dominance and submission, or are we rejecting those and throwing those out the window? Caregiving to children, creativity, like who's bringing that creative energy, who's to what degree, what creative energies do we like from our partner, what's maybe getting to be too much. Sex is there, kink is there, physical intimacy that is not sex, emotional intimacy. Exclusivity, to what degree are we exclusive? To what degree does our relationship have a hierarchy over other relationships? Religious and spiritual aspects, labels and terms. And then you can add, and finally, systems of oppression. So to what degree do cultural systems of oppression, are those affecting our relationship, and how do we want to manage that in our relationship? So it's a lot to think about, and you can add things to the list, but you can also take things off the list. You can go through and just immediately be like, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about that. I've absolutely done this where you actually print it out, sit down, talk to people. But I've also done this where, reviewing this myself and then bringing those questions to my partner. So, for example, my wife and I think she would balk at sitting down and going through a thing like this. As a matter of fact, I suggested it, and I don't recall, it was many years ago, but we never ended up doing it. But we both were familiar with the idea, and we went through it. And that gave us the opportunity at our relationship check-ins to talk about elements and what and really get into each element. So for us, we more like picked an element and talked about it like in depth, and then we would move on to a different element. So it wasn't like so much of a let's go through the whole list. It was let's pick one and talk about that, because our situation is day in day out, all like 24/7. Like we're together. Well, not together 24/7, but we're doing the long-term marriage thing. So it was easier for us to do it that way, and more approachable and less emotional overload. Another really important thing to think about here is that it's relationships are an opt-in situation. So if somebody says no to one of these things, that's a no. And that's the person who wants less gets less. That's the way that this goes. Now you can have some conversation about why that is you want less, but it's important that we not try to coerce no's into yeses, especially since our culture is really bad about that in a lot of ways. We teach people that it's not okay to say no. So yeah, don't try to turn no's into yeses, but also it's okay to have conversation to understand and unpack those no's more, because a lot of times you find out more when you actually get into why is that? Or what do you mean by that? Asking clarifying questions. But for example, if a person no longer wants to have a sexual relationship with you, then you're not going to have a sexual relationship. If a person is saying, no, I'm not comfortable sharing finances, you don't share finances. These are all personal autonomy issues. So it's very important that when you're going into this to make sure that you're aware of your personal power and looking at it honestly in terms of what you want, what you really want. And then also say, this is not static. This is not something that you do and then it's just set for the rest of your relationship. We all change. Every minute of every day we're changing. Our relationships, therefore, are also changing all the time. So periodic check-ins on this stuff is important. And, maybe something's working really well for you now, but in 6 months or a year or 5 years, it won't work in the same way. So being open to reevaluating and adjusting. In my life, I found that leads to happier, more fulfilled relationships. Also, there's an experience that I particularly love that is when you go through the experience of being really scared to bring up some of these things, talking about them and having it be hard, but then having things be better after you did, that's so empowering. And it makes you less afraid to do it the next time. Now, it doesn't always go well. Like I said, one memorable time, this destroyed, I had a relationship that was on the way out anyway, like lots of challenges, and it was going to end. But doing the smorgasbord just shined a big old spotlight on how this relationship was not going to be what my partner wanted to fulfill them. And that was very hard. And it led to some, frankly, I wish I would have handled that in a more mature way, a better way, but didn't. We make mistakes. We do our best. But yeah, it's not going to fix every relationship. But if you have a relationship that's really meaningful, that is already, bringing really positive things to both of you, it can help you to focus that. It can help bring collaborative effort around that. And one final thought that I'll leave you with on this is just that another attitude that I find important when you're approaching this is the attitude that no one's done anything wrong. This is not a situation where you did something to me and I did something to you. This is a situation where we find ourselves in a situation of wanting to clarify and make change. And so we together are looking at our relationship. So that can be really, really helpful when you're looking at these things, because it stops you from blaming the other person so much or feeling guilty or like you're to blame. Get the blame out of there by recognizing that we are collectively in this situation. And so we're collectively talking about how we want to move forward in this situation, whether that situation is a happy conversation about we want to move in together and we're feeling super excited, or a conversation that's this relationship's not working for us and we want to stay in each other's lives, but we want to change it and de-escalate, bring it back down to something else. Being together in it is much more productive than being combatants. So Thanks very much for listening. This is Leela, the proud poly kinky queer slut. You can email me your questions at kinkyqueerslut@gmail.com. And thank you very much and have a great day.